So, Rachel,
So Brittany.
let's talk about Tieska.
Yes. Tieska
I
Jumbo.
Tieska Jumbo, I think I called her a Jill of all trades in the podcast because the woman has really done everything. Not to be a spoiler, but she was in education like you were. She went into corporate training. She did some library science stuff, and she found knowledge management because people came to her asking questions about, where can we find things? How can we do things? And she kind of stumbled into knowledge management the way you and I also did, which was, oh, I guess I'm doing this now because I can
Yeah.
figure out the answers and help people find what they need.
Yeah. And then she kind of went off and went to library science school in London, and then jumped around and ended up in communications and did these other things, but then ultimately came back to knowledge management, found her way back to it. And um incredible story. She shares a little bit about it. It was nice to be able to connect those dots all the way through, but with KM being through line, uh was the Clifton strength, and she does that for coaching now, but she specifically wants to be able to connect that to knowledge managers and how to help knowledge managers use those strengths in their cultures, which I think is just fascinating.
Yeah.
But I've never actually heard of or really learned about the assessment prior to speaking with her.
I think I would have never thought to apply it to knowledge management. And I've
Oh
been
no.
doing knowledge management for a long time. I know you've been doing knowledge management for a long time too. So I think in my mind, I had heard of CliftonStrengths, but it was that organizational personality test. How do we get along? That kind of stuff. I would have never thought to connect them together. But as she walked us through our own assessments,
Yeah.
both Rachel and I took assessments in advance of this so that she could walk us through it in the episode. As she walked us through each of our things, the things that were different, the things that were similar, how they overlap and different things, I could see it. I was like, I had this aha moment of like, I can actually really see how this would be super useful. Even just those four main buckets for knowledge management, people who are working in knowledge management, whether they have the title or not, if you're doing knowledge management, to be able to think of people in these groups that way, the different strengths that they have and how you communicate things and how you work with them. It's brilliant. It's really great. So
It
it's
is.
a very
You're in for a
enjoyable episode. Yep. It's one of our favorite episodes, I think, if we're allowed to have favorites.
Yeah, we are. We are. It's our podcast. We're allowed to. But I think one thing too that I found super interesting is that even though you and I had a couple of, there's 34 different strengths that you can have, but the ones that are even overlapping, the definitions for each are different. So, for example, you and I each had the word belief, and the word belief, if we go and we read through the definitions, each read differently for you and I. And then the word belief is different than like what your traditional like Webster dictionary would say. So, obviously the definitions are tailored to the assessment in general, but then they are even tailored to the context of your strengths, which I just found fascinating. And it seemed to fit really well. So I really, again, enjoyed this episode tremendously, and I'm now going to look at my strengths differently as we move forward. But one thing is for sure, we get a lot of things done, you and I. We're like the platonic power couple.
And now we understand why.
Yeah, right? Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. So without any further ado, please enjoy Tieska Jumbo. Roll the intro.
What's the point of another KM podcast? Well, I tell you, we've got every kind of point, like power and share, laser and name, bullet and prize, focus and pain, power and
stands for knowledge management, by the way.
laser and name.
Well, I'm really happy you're here, Taiska. I know that we've had some really good conversations leading up to this, but to dive more into your experience and your journey, I wonder before we dive in, because we've got some guiding questions, and then we have an activity that we're going to do today, which we're really excited about, that you're going to help walk Rachel and I through. I might just turn it over to you to introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers, just to say a little bit more about who you are, and then we can get the party started. So, I will turn things over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me on the podcast. My name is Tieska Jumbo, and I am a knowledge management strategist. I'm a CliftonStrengths facilitator. There are a bunch of things that I do. I'm a speaker and a writer and all these things. But my main through line is helping individuals and organizations move from ideas and thinking to action. Everything that I do and have done throughout my career is to help people get to their desired outcome. That's me in a nutshell.
Yep. I guess what is you're a Jill of all trades instead of a jack of all trades. You do a lot of do a lot of things. I
Yes.
think, as part of your journey that you shared with us, you moved from teaching into like the corporate training world and then into knowledge management across different sectors. So when you think about that and you reflect on that journey, what is the thread that's kind of been pulling you through all of that? Because they're related, but they are also different. So what is the thread that's kind of been pulling you through your journey to knowledge management?
The thread is connecting people with the information and the knowledge and the people that they need to achieve their goals. So, whether that's
Mm,
in a high school classroom, helping students to pass English and understand what it is that they need to do so that they can graduate, or helping new employees into an organization understand what they need to do to acclimate and get started strongly, or leaders in that organization to communicate better and lead more effectively, or managing the metadata on the back end of a system so that what is presented to the end user makes sense, or building a SharePoint site or a Confluence site so that people can find the information they need. Whatever it is, whatever industry I've been in, I have recognized that through all of my different job titles, that's what I'm doing. I am passing along information. I'm connecting people and information and knowledge together and helping them to move forward.
I love
That's
that.
that's awesome. You kind of took a really interesting journey to get here, right? You said you started in classroom space. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Okay, so many moons ago, more than 20 years ago, I started as a high school English teacher in Florida. I knew that I wasn't going to be a teacher forever, but in public education, there are really two paths that you can take, maybe three. You could be a teacher forever, you can go into administration, or you can be like a librarian or some other kind of professional in that way. I knew that I wasn't going to teach forever. I had no interest whatsoever in becoming an administrator, but librarianship was very intriguing to me. I'm a very bookish kind of person. I've got books everywhere. Um, and so I thought about going to library school to become a librarian, whether a public school librarian or an academic librarian or some other type of special librarian. But I waited a couple of years and I discovered corporate training. So I was trying to figure out how to make that jump between high school teaching and corporate training. And it took me a few years and making networking, doing some freelance work before I was able to make that jump. When I made that jump, I moved into the logistics industry and I loved that job. I got to welcome new hires into the organization and do other types of training. But one of the things I noticed after I would do these orientations is that the people new to the company would say, "Hey, Taiska, you said that we had all these information resources and that there are all these people that we can connect with to kind of help us, get along here, get in on our journey. Where can I find them?" I'm like, there's not just like one place that I can point you to. I can, send some emails to connect you with people, or I can send you some links to, some documents, but there wasn't one central place that I could send people to. And that led me to research and try to figure out, how do you solve this problem? Because this is a problem. I can't, email all, 100 of these people I just trained. And my research took me back to librarianship, but because I found knowledge management. So I learned the term knowledge management. I learned the term information management. And around 2010, the path that I saw was to go to librarian school to learn how to organize information and organize knowledge, because that's what being a librarian is really about. It's not so much about the books themselves; it's about organizing information and making it available for people to find.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with knowledge and knowledge management is organizing that one part of it is organizing that
Hmm.
knowledge, getting it out of people's heads. And anyway, so I did that for a couple of years. Then I moved to London to pursue librarianship. I did a 1 year program there and I worked for a year. The first year after librarian school, I worked for a startup in London. It was an art sales website, and I worked as a content manager on the back end, managing the metadata that went along with the images that were ingested into the website. After that, I moved into higher education in the UK. I worked part time at the library, but I also worked in the course and admin office, and that was an administrative role. But after that, I moved into learning technology, where I was working with the professors and librarians in using tools. Like we used a lot of the Google Workspace and Google tools to bring technology into their university classrooms. And then from there, I came back to the United States and got into technical writing. And so I started documenting technology systems and helping users understand how to use the system and connecting them with the information that way. And from there, that really took me further into financial technology, where I began adding more scope into the technical writing and to building knowledge bases. The project I was most proud about and excited about when I moved into financial technology was building a knowledge base that would enable our clients to self-serve before they log a ticket. So, oftentimes when you sell a piece of software, there is customer support. You can log a ticket when you have a problem. But because there was a backlog of tickets, and some of them were really simple things that if a client just had, some good documentation or some good access to some information, they could solve that problem for themselves and they wouldn't have to log a ticket. So my responsibility was to build this knowledge base that would enable our customers to self-serve. And if they couldn't, then they could log a ticket. And on the back end, our employees who supported them could also search that knowledge base, attach that knowledge article to tickets so that you could set a precedence. You don't have to repeat the wheel, all of these things. So I started doing more of that. And I kind of took that model and building knowledge bases internal in other roles. So I would build these SharePoint based or Confluence based knowledge bases that would connect people and information so that the business goals could be advanced.
So you were able to kind of grab your strengths, your superpowers, if you will, and you were able to kind of harness that in identifying yours and helping people kind of see what they were using to harness theirs, right? So, what helped you see your own invisible value again in all of that? Because you took a journey to get to where you were going. How did you, how did you figure out this is what I want to do now?
You know, I left being an employee last year, July 2025. And over this past year, or almost year, I have kind of figured out what am I going to be now when I grow up. When I was an employee, I discovered a tool called CliftonStrengths, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about. And
Right.
it's an assessment that helps you figure out what you're naturally talented at, what you're naturally good at. And that was a transformational experience for me because I finally understood why I have no chill, why I am wired. Because at that point, this was like 5 or 6 years ago, I was looking at my husband. It's like, man, when I met him, he had just finished his graduate degree in facilities management. And like, that's what he's done for the past 15 years. He's been in facilities in different respects, but it's just been facilities. His wife, on the other hand, has done everything. Why can't I just be like him and do one thing? And the Strengths helped me realize because you're not wired like him, because you're wired like you, because you have learner in your top five and you just like to know stuff. You like to know how to do different things, which is one of the things that explains learning new careers and figuring out how to find my through line no matter what it is that I'm doing. And when I think about knowledge management now, I'm thinking about it through a strengths based lens because there are four different domains within the strengths. There's execution, which means you like to get stuff done. There's influencing, which means you can use your voice to get other people to move. There's relationship building, which means that you understand that together we're better than the sum of our parts, that you bring people together. And then there's strategic thinking, which means that you recognize the patterns of things. And as I've reflected this over this past year, over the last few years of my career, I felt like I had gotten away from my core, the thing that I told you is my through line, because I started doing internal communications and strategic planning and some of these other things that did not, to me, seem directly related to knowledge management just because it didn't have the title. But when I think about that transference of knowledge, it's all connected. So whether
Yeah.
I'm a technical writer, whether I'm an internal communicator, whether I'm a corporate trainer, I'm still connecting the dots for other people and creating the systems that allow people to connect the dots for themselves. And it was my strengths that helped me see, oh, I'm doing the same thing. It's just called something different. It's just in a different industry. It's just in a different way.
That's the moment that we all kind of have of the, "Oh, I'm in KM now." That that kind of that kind of moment.
Or I've been in
Just
KM
building
all
on
along.
yeah, turns out this is the thing that I've been doing this whole time. Um, just building on what you were saying, Taiska, you've held, these senior roles in strategic planning and communications, and now, and building these knowledge bases in SharePoint and Confluence, and you're leaning into this strengths-based KM. What you kind of touched on this, but I wonder if you can go a little bit deeper on it. What gap did you see in traditional knowledge management that strengths helped you fill?
Well, I think the gap in a lot of things really is as individuals, we do things the way that we think they should be done. So my domain that I work through is execution. And interestingly, so it's the same with both of you. All three of us operate through execution, but we use different strengths to get there. So that's the really cool thing. So I noticed that when I was leading my team, a team of technical communicators, content managers, learning and development experts, and I was transferring the knowledge to them so that we could achieve our goals as a team. I went about it in the way that I think works. Here's the goal. Here's your target. Here are the steps that you need to do. Go do it. And that's also the way that I would design knowledge systems. So, when I'm building a SharePoint system, I'm thinking, okay, let's make sure that the goals are really prominent. They know exactly what the mission is, what the values, what the purpose is, what our targets are. If there's some tech involved and we need to know what the goals are for the sprints or whatever, let's make sure that all of that is really, really prominent so they know where they're going. And on the side, I would say, okay, well, here's the people that you can connect with, or maybe we can add some meetings in here. But my main thought process is execution. So you need your target and you need your steps. That's a gap because we know that there are multiple areas of knowledge management. There's the people, process, technology, there's the creation, there's the use, there's the reuse, there's the archive, there's all these different areas that need to be encompassed. But if you only think about yourself, if you're a relationship builder, you're just thinking about, okay, I'm just going to do communities of practice. I'm just going to make sure that people have their meetings all the time and they're going to talk. And I'm only thinking about the people part, but I'm not thinking about um, technology, or I'm not thinking about the execution and people need clear rules to make this happen. Or I'm not thinking like a strategic thinker and thinking, okay, what are the metrics? How is this data driven? How is this data centered? And you don't encompass all of those things. So the gap is only thinking through one domain and not making accommodations for the other types of
Mm.
people in your ecosystem.
So it's only it's only harnessing that one lens, that one point of view, rather than being able to, adapt a little bit. It doesn't mean you have to change your entire way of thinking, but it's just being open to viewing other perspectives.
Right.
Gotcha. So our listeners are in for a treat because we're about to do a mini Clifton Strengths exercise together. Brittany and I both took the survey earlier this week. We sent our results to you to analyze. I did not really look at mine because I had a lot of other things going on and I didn't want to review it myself before I had the expert do it. So I'll get it read in real time here in front of all y'all. So what should listeners and viewers pay attention to as they hear us unpack our strengths, especially in the context of KM and collaboration?
So one thing that I've mentioned already is the domain that you lead with, and I mentioned that there are 4 different domains,
Mhm.
and there are 2 things that is important to me that everybody knows about strengths. One, the premise of strengths is to lean into what is right with you, not what is wrong with you. You get a much higher return on investment when you operate in your strengths as opposed to saying, well, I'm not very good at X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to build those up. I'm going to take all these courses or I'm going to do all these things to try to improve my weaknesses. Strength says no. Focus on what you're really good at. You can leverage different strengths to achieve whatever the outcome is of having this weakness, you think, or partner with other people. Strengths really work best when they're brought in connection with others. So if you just know your strengths, that's great, but it works best when you are able to share your strengths with others and understand what theirs are, because then you can partner. So if there's something you don't have, you can find somebody who does have it, and now you're much stronger together. So that's what I want everybody to understand. So Rachel, you already said that you did not look at yours, so you probably don't have an initial impression about it,
No
about
initial
your results.
impression. I'm
Okay.
like open to all of it.
Okay.
I also only briefly looked and said, "Oh, those are my top 5," and I haven't really in-depthly looked at things, so we are both very fresh
Okay.
in this,
All right, here
so
we go. So when you take your Clifton Strengths assessment, it takes about 30 minutes to do. Each question is timed. I think they give you about 20 seconds to take it because they want to get your gut response. They don't want you to
yep.
try to manipulate and come out a certain way. They really want your gut response. And there are 34 different strengths. They are equal. Not one is better than the other. And so you are ranked from 1 through 34. Your top 5 are the strengths that you operate through most. These are your signature themes. You'll also hear me, I might use these following words interchangeably: strengths, themes, talents. Strengths is actually aspirational. So the 34 natural talents, they become strengths when you do things to build them up. Whether you learn more about them, you get some more information, or you put them into practice, so you're building them up. You add your knowledge, your skills, and abilities to turn that talent into a strength. So the word strength is aspirational. So your top 5 and even top 10 are the area that you naturally respond in. So then those go across the 4 themes. So like I said, both of you operate through execution, which means you're really focused on productivity. You want to see something get accomplished, and you may not feel satisfied until you have something has become real, something has become tangible. Does that resonate?
I mean, we have this podcast and we're in the middle of writing a book that we said was going to be done by November by accident.
And you just had a conference, right? So you are doing things. So this sounds very spot on. Now,
Yeah.
Yep.
so even though all 3 of us operate through execution and we like to get things done, the way that we do it, the natural talents that we're using are different. So, Brittany, your top 5 are belief, consistency, futuristic, responsibility, strategic.
Mhm.
So 3 out of those
Oh.
5 are executing themes. 2 of them are strategic thinking. Rachel, your top 5 are responsibility, arranger, individualization, input, and communication. So your top 2 are executing themes. The third one is relationship building. Your fourth one is strategic thinking, and your fifth one is influencing. So whereas Brittany is more execution heavy, she's got 3 out of the 5 are execution and 2 are strategic thinking. You cross the board. So you're more similar to me in that you've got all 4 themes. And that's kind of rare. Generally, you see more people who are like Brittany, where they're heavier on one domain and not spread across. So that's interesting. Now,
Terminal uniqueness.
um, the only commonality in your top 5 is responsibility. So for Rachel, responsibility is your number 1, and Brittany, that's your number 4.
Yep.
Responsibility inherently means that you have a psychological need to do what you said you're going to do. Rachel, you literally just said that. You said, we're going to publish a book in November somehow because we just said we were going to do it. So because you have said that you're going to publish this book, there's no doubt in my mind that this book is going to be published. Maybe it won't be November, but it's going to be published because you said it. And you're not going to be satisfied because you operate through execution, because you have high responsibility. You're not going to be satisfied until it's done. So it's going to get done. Okay, let's see. I think that's the only common one. So that brings up one of the points that I said about strengths. understanding strengths is about getting to outcomes. So the outcome of execution is getting things done, but the way that you do it, the strengths that you bring to the table, the talents that you bring to the table are different. And that's the beauty of it. Because sometimes we get really caught up in, well, they didn't do it this way, so it must be wrong. Did
Yep.
the outcome get achieved? Was the book published? Does it matter if they published it on Amazon or Ingram Spark? No. Does it matter that the book was published? Yes. Maybe they used Canva. Who cares? Was the book published? Yes, the book was published. That's what strengths is about. Did the outcome get achieved? Yes. Does it matter how they got there? No. Brittany, your number two is consistency. Consistency is about treating people and situations the same. So people know that when they meet Brittany, they're going to see the same person over and over again. When you see a situation or when you see different people, you are going to treat them um, consistently. Like you're going to show up and treat Rachel the same way that you would treat me, or, treat somebody who you haven't met. You're going to show up the same way. The opposite of consistency is individualization, which I think
I'm
Rachel
3.
has. So Rachel
Yeah.
has individualization. So individualization looks at people as individuals. So Rachel, you see people as, you don't really see them as a group of people. You say, hey, there's Tieska who happens to be standing in the group. Tieska is a very specific person with a specific set of whatever. So I'm going to accommodate Tieska's needs because Tieska is an individual. So whereas Brittany would say, look at that group of people. I want to make sure that they all have the same experience because I want to make sure that they get whatever it is that they're coming to get. There are standards, there's a specific set of rules, there's a process, there's everything that there's equity in this situation because I am
Mm-hmm.
consistent. Rachel says, yeah, I hear that. That's great. However, Taiska needs this, whereas Brittany needs this. So I can't exactly give her the same set of standards and processes because they're different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we just look at
It
equity
makes
differently.
it makes sense, and I think I've seen this play out in dynamics that Rachel and I have had where it's not that I don't care about individual things, and Rachel's the one that helps to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks, right? So I'm the one that kind of will push things forward, and then Rachel is the one that's like, okay, but to make sure that this person needs this and this person needs this, because sometimes it's very easy for me to just like charge 100% in one direction. And Rachel's really good about being like, that is really cool and we need that. However, you're leaving so and so and so and so behind and we need them, right? And so it's a really good, I see how I move Rachel when we need to move, and Rachel is the one that kind of fills in those gaps for me when I start moving too fast. And so I've actually seen that play out, especially in the conference planning, if I'm honest, like as far as different things. At first I was like, consistency, what is that? That makes a lot of sense. And now that I think about it, I've seen that kind of play out in our dynamic.
Yeah, because consistency, like, because I was actually worried because consistency for me is 33, and I was like, I'm a consistent person. I'm consistent in people's lives, but like consistency in the context in which you explained it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's the other thing about strengths is these, even though these are all, English words, they don't have direct dictionary translations.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the strengths around them. So even though you both have responsibility in your top five, the fact that you have other talents around them means that your paragraphs are probably going to read differently. So your
Oh, okay.
responsibility is not the
Oh,
same as
okay.
her responsibility. Now,
Before can I just ask a question before we go too far because I'm hyper fixated on this. Please tell me what woo means.
WOO is an acronym that stands for winning others over. And that is a
Oh, okay.
person who is like a people person. They have never met a stranger. They just love talking to people. They know they're going to work a room. They're going to do all the things like that. So
Brittany,
Brittany, yours
where
is
do you think that
Where
33.
does
falls
it
for me,
where does that show up in your list, Rachel?
Well, I'm curious, where
20.
does that show up in yours?
Number 33 out of 34.
Okay, well, mine's 20.
Yeah.
Aren't you surprised it's 20 though?
I am surprised that yours is 20. I would think
And
that that would be
not like 4?
exactly.
Yeah,
Not like
right?
one of the top 5. I think it's
Yeah.
also, and Taiska, maybe this is something you can help us unpack because both Rachel and I have ADHD. So some of these questions, it was like, I prefer structure. I prefer doing this. And I was like, well, I prefer that, but does it happen? it's so some of these, there's a lot of nuance. And I think that both Rachel and I win others over in our jobs all the time, but it's not necessarily at our baseline operational. Like for me, it's the second to last. It's not how I baseline operational like approach things, but can I do it? Absolutely. And you rise to that level when the situation happens. But it's really, yeah, that's interesting that it's number 20 for you, Rach, because I would have thought it would
Yeah,
be higher.
there used to be a time where I couldn't walk down the main street in my town without somebody stopping me personally or professionally because everybody knew me. I mean, but even still, like in the conference setting, like people come to me that I don't know in conferences and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, Rachel." So like I'm winning people
Everyone knows
over.
you.
I know. I, come on now, who doesn't know?
Well,
Editing that out.
that's the outcome. Winning, like making these relationships with people is the outcome of your other strengths. So it's not like we said, you don't have to have that talent of woo that you don't that doesn't have to be your approach, but you're still getting to that same thing. So you're probably
Mm,
using a combination of individualization. Everybody knows you because you probably remember something about them. You probably asked them how their dog was. Hey, your dog had surgery. How was your dog? Or your kid just had a baseball game. How's your kid? Or
But I
some
can't remember your name.
my husband is the same way, and individualization is his number one. And he operates through relationship building. He loves meeting people. He can work a room. I am not that. But he can't remember
Okay.
anybody's name for anything, and I remember everybody's names. So it's very interesting. Um,
That's okay. So sorry, I didn't mean to deviate, but woo, I was just hyper fixated because the ADHD part.
that's okay. Um,
I
so
think we were at 3 or whatever the third one was.
Yes, but before we get to those down the line, I want to go back to something Brittany said. You were saying that how you both come together. So you're kind of off to the races, and Rachel kind of grounds you back in. Okay, but there are these other things that we need to be aware of. So the fact that you're off to the races is very, very execution focused. But also you have two strategic thinking things with themes, which are
mhm.
futuristic and strategic. So strategic means that you see patterns really quickly and you're
Yeah.
absorbing the data. You can see it's like, okay, well, I see all the things. I have analyzed this, and I can see that we could do A, B, C, or D. And futuristic also means that you can see the future, like you can see what it could be, right? So you've got this big like imagination, and you can just see how great it can be. So that futuristic plus strategic, and the fact that you like to get stuff done means once you see it, you want to go do it.
Mhm.
Whereas Rachel has a ranger as her number two, which means that she sees all the things. And Rachel can pull all the things together. So just like you said, okay, yeah, let's go. Rachel's like, but yeah, there's this person who needs this, and there's this thing and that. That's what an arranger does. An arranger sees all of the things. It's like, let's pull all the things together. She also has input at number four. Input is like a partner strength to learner. Learner is like a person just likes to learn a bunch of things. That's my number five. I have a bunch of random knowledge. Like, yes, I have a master's degree in library science. I can also braid your hair, and I can crochet something, so it's these random, random bits of things. So Rachel has input, which is collecting knowledge. So you probably have a bunch of
Mm.
books. You may have actually literally collected things as a child. You maybe have like a bunch of bookmarks. You're the person to go to if like, do you have, I wonder if, you have the Excel shortcuts. Rachel would be the person that's like, girl, I have this, bookmark here. Here's a link. Or I've got, this book that you can read. Or I know a person who can help you with that. It's like, it makes sense with that, everybody because that's a part of input. You're like, I got a guy or I got a girl. I know, just that's
Rachel
what you did.
Rachel is the I got a guy person. She is
I know that's what she did
absolutely
for me. I went down my rabbit hole. I met her and I was like, hey, I'm just trying to get connected in the knowledge management world. She's like, there's no better person that you have come to than me because I
I
know a
got a
guy,
guy.
Like, so
And by the end of the call, I had 10 people lined up and
had already
yes.
made all the connections. So that's a ranger and input together. And then that individualization and the fact that you're like, oh, used to be a teacher. Well, Rebecca used to be
Yeah.
a teacher too, so you two should talk. There's that individualization. So that's you. And then your number five is communication, which means you've probably got a story for everything. And you can really paint a picture with your words. So when you talk, people can visualize what it is that you're saying because you're a very good storyteller and you've got an example for everything to make things come alive. So how does that sound? Does that sound like so I just went through your top five, both of you, very quickly.
Yeah.
Does that
No, no,
sound
that
track like a
that
track?
sounds me. Yeah.
I yeah, I think it's something where sometimes with these things I always am like, is this the right answer? Is it, and so I appreciated that it was timed because it was like, what does my gut say? Is it this or is it this? Like just make a decision, Brittany. And I think my next question, so we've got our top 5 and then we have 6 through 10.
Hmm.
So not that they're not as important, but what is the relationship between there's your top 5 and then 6 through 10? Obviously they're still part of your top 10. They're not as
Hmm.
strong as the 5, but what is the relationship, I guess, between those then?
Yes. So the top 10, if you think about like energy, like a battery, your top
Yep.
10 is when you're working on a full battery. Your phone's at 100% charge, or you
Mm,
just put a fresh batch of energizers in the remote and it's going really fast. Your like 11 through 25 or so is like your battery's on 50%. It's still working. You're still getting stuff done. You might be a little bit slower, but you can still function, right? And then your like 26 to 34, it's not an exact science. Those are like you're on fumes. You got like 10%,
yep.
your battery's going to shut off at any minute. So you can like Rachel, you talked about, or Brittany, your woo was 34. Like if you absolutely had to go into a new space and work a room, you could do it. But you're probably going to putter out really quickly, and you're going to need to go in a dark quiet room afterwards to like recharge, right? But you
Yeah.
Yeah.
could do it, it's just not the way that you would prefer to do it. So that's what those
It's
strengths
so
mean. Go
yeah.
ahead.
It's so funny. No, it's so funny because just reflecting on how, because I tell people this all the time that I'm a high functioning introvert, and everyone is so surprised because when they meet me or they see me doing this and they're like, she has no problem. She talks in front of people all the time. She's crazy. She's doing this. She's doing this. She's doing this. But it takes a lot of effort, right? And
Yeah.
even for the Empower KM conference, we were around people all the time. We were speaking, we were in rooms, we were in front of people, we were doing things, and I got energy from it, and it was exciting and it was great. But then I needed to sit in the hotel room and not speak to anyone. And I was rooming with one of the participants, and she's a verbal processor, and she wanted to talk about the day. And I was like, I had a pillow over my face, and I was like, I just need 20 minutes where I'm not around anybody and I'm not doing anything. So it's really funny because yes, I can do all of those things. It just some take more energy than others, and I have to literally recharge so that I can be able to go do it again. So it's just really funny to hear. It's funny to hear that because it does align, and people are surprised, but I think it's how you perform and how you function, right? So I think that's really interesting. Communication is my last one. It's number
Oh, that's
34.
fun. Harmony is my life.
Interesting. That's also interesting for you. But I wonder
Is
in
it
what
though?
sense, because like Tieska said, there's context around it. So I wonder in what sense for harmony.
So harmony means that you look for group consensus. And it's interesting. Consistency is 33 and harmony is 34. And you've got that individualization really high. So that consistency and harmony down there at the bottom just means that it's, if you had to say, okay, we're going to use this one set of processes and on one way of doing things so that we can keep the boat floats nice and steady and like not rock the boat and just keep everything nice and peaceful. And, we're just going to sit here and everything's going to be okay. You could,
Yeah.
but your preference is to let's pull all the things together. Let's look at the individuals. Like, yes, okay, we've got the group. I see the group and I can do the group, but I still see the Thaisans got on that lime green shirt. Can't ignore that lime green shirt. I'm trying really hard and I'm going to ignore it because I have to, but I still I'm like hyper focused. What did you say you were hyper focused on earlier? There was something you
The
wanted.
woo.
Woo. So we're in this in this podcast right now, and I know we're going to talk about all the strengths, and we're going to stay on track and all of that, but I'm struggling with this woo. I need to talk about this woo, and then we're gonna get back on track. So so that's kind of an example of, yeah, I can be consistent. I can keep the harmony if I have to, but my eye naturally goes on zeroes in on the one thing.
Yeah. Okay. Huh. This is so fascinating.
Isn't it? I
Right?
love it. And
Yeah.
I love it because it's not just like I did this at work and it transformed the way that I lead my team. But it helped me understand like the way that I communicate with my husband better. You know, he's got relationship building and strategic thinking themes, and he asks 150 questions all the time. So me, high execution, listen, can we just do the thing? Let's just go and do the thing. And he's like, but babe, have you thought about no, I just want to do it. I've already done all the thinking I need to do. And he's like, but there's and it's great because even though I find it frustrating sometimes, he forces me to consider things that I didn't consider. So even though I know I'm intelligent and all of these things, and I've done a lot of thinking, like before I move, there's still things that are stones that have been left unturned. And
Mhm.
it was the same way when I was leading my team. I learned that I was leading a team of strategic thinkers. And that's why I felt friction. That's why I was struggling so much. And I'm like, why do you still have questions? I gave you the target, I gave you the steps. Go. But that's the way that I function. That's not the way that they function. They needed time to ask questions. They needed time to sit and process. There's also a story that I like to tell because it really helps people kind of look at the outcomes. So
Please.
Yeah.
my top five: relator, achiever, responsibility, maximizer, learner. It's a very intense set of strengths. Relator means I like deep relationships with a few people. So, like, I've had the same friends for like 20, 30 years. The newest
Mhm.
friend I have is like 10 years. Like, that's my new friend, right? And I I hired someone several years ago that like I really rushed the process. I was anxious about the process because it was my first time hiring somebody, and I probably didn't make the best decision that I could have made. And when I got this person on board, we were kind of like oil and water. And even though I was trying to be really equitable in the way that I was leading my team, one of the things that I would ask each of them is, if there's anything that you need from me or need me to do or need me to do differently, please let me know because responsibility is my number three. And I've decided that I'm going to be the best leader that I can be. And as a responsible leader, I check in with my team. Well, she told me that, I noticed that when you are talking with certain members of our team on team meetings, like you have like chit chat, small talk. And when you talk to me, there's none of that. It's just all about business. Now, I did not trust her, so there was a lack of trust there too, but that also comes from the relator, kind of takes me a while. Um, so there was a little bit of lack of trust, and I just felt like I needed to protect myself. So I'm going to keep this all about business. Um, and then she said she felt excluded. And I said, "Oh,
Mm.
okay." Well, that was hard to hear, but I listened because I'll listen. I'll take it in. I went, I thought about it, and I had just received my strengths. Guess what my bottom two are? My bottom two are woo and includer. So I saw that includer. She literally said she felt excluded. I looked at my strengths. I said, I am 100% doing what she says that I'm doing, even though it's not intentional. And I'm not trying to exclude her, but that is the outcome of the way that I'm showing up. And that is not
Yep.
fair. That's not right.
Yep.
I can't walk around saying I believe what I believe and that I'm the kind of leader that I am. And that is the way that somebody on my team is feeling as a result of the way that I'm showing up. So
Mhm.
I said, okay, I don't have woo, and I'm not going to pretend because I'm not. I have to be authentic, right? I have to show up as me. But I do have this responsibility to make sure that she is set up for success. And a part of that is feeling included. And I do have a learner. I can learn about anybody. So I started asking her questions about herself. So during our one-on-ones, I started taking time to set the business aside and let's just talk. Let's figure some things out. And so I started asking her questions about herself. And we found some real commonalities. So now we're able to have genuine chit chat, genuine small talk because we found some commonalities. Because I use the strengths that I do have, responsibility and learner, to have the outcome of making her feel included and making her feel set up for success. So that's what strengths is about. It's about finding finding that common ground so that you can get to the outcome in a way that is authentic to both parties.
Mhm.
So I didn't have to pretend to be like, "Hey girl, how you doing?" because that's not me and I didn't feel that way and it would not have come across genuinely. But when I figured out who she really was and learned some things about her, now we can talk. And I bring that approach to anybody. I can learn. I can find connections with
Yep.
anybody. You know. So you use your top five or top 10 to figure out how you can show up to get to that expected end. one more thing before I pause. So the strengths are great, but you'll notice in your 34 report that there are blind spots where you
Mm,
can
Mm.
overuse your strengths, and you know that you have overused your strengths for yourself when now you're feeling tired or burned out or overwhelmed. So, like for me, number one with Relator, if I have spent too much time with people or trying to be with somebody and really really listen and be engaged, if I've done too much of that, I feel drained. So I have over exercised my Relator strength.
mm,
And if now I have been standoffish, like my employee said. Now I have been in my relator strength, which can become clicky. So now I have been standoffish with you, and I'm talking to you. Now you feel bad. So now I have over exercised my relator strength in a bad way for you. So there's a way to find that balance. So responsibility, Rachel, is your number one. If you're trying to do too many things, like you got the podcast, you got the conference coming up in February 2027, you got the book you're trying to finish in November, you might be overstretched. So with that
nah, not yet.
responsibility, and I know you got a family, you got all kinds, you got a your job, you might have too many things going on. So with high responsibility, you have the tendency to take on too much at once. And so when you start feeling stressed and tense, and I don't know what stress looks like for you, or how that manifests. When you start feeling those things, you have to look at that. Do I have too much responsibility right now? Is there too much going on? And Brittany, for you, your number one is belief. We didn't talk about your number
Hmm.
one, belief. A belief is about feeling like there is like you have some core values. You believe strongly in what you believe in, and that really those core values, those beliefs really drive you. And sometimes, like if you over exercise that, your core values and your beliefs can be so set that maybe you're alienating other people. And so that could be you over exercising that belief, because now people are alienated because of your beliefs. Or if you're over emphasizing your core beliefs for yourself, now you're not open to other perspectives, which may make you feel you're too intrinsic, you're too internal. Now you're not able to see
Hmm.
what's happening outside.
It
Yeah,
surprises me a
like
little bit.
what, the number one?
Yeah. I mean, I know you pretty well, and that hasn't like I haven't encountered that with you, but that
Well,
doesn't
I think
mean that. I mean, you've been on a journey of growth, so
I have. So that's, I think, where the context of all of this actually comes in, because even though having, belief, if you look at, by nature, you sometimes throw yourself into work, even when you are personally inconvenienced. You think before you act. You want to demonstrate how to deliver on promises by doing the right thing. Um, you want to get to know people on a personal level. And once you understand someone as an individual, you might be more apt to inconvenience yourself or give something up for something that you value for that person. I do think that this is still very strong, but the context around the other strengths. And so the 6 through 10, we have relator is number 7, which I think softens that belief a little bit more. And then connectedness is number 9, and
oh,
restorative
that's
is
good.
number 10. So I
Okay.
think that because I also was like, am I really that judgmental? Like in my daily life, like just kind of like, oh, you don't agree with me? Sometimes we want to do that, but like, is that really a number one strength of mine? But when I look at it in the context, and Tieska, what I heard you saying, look at it in the context of these other strengths and that kind of environment that they all create, it makes a little bit more sense. Because yes, that is a key thing, but it's balanced by, I want to achieve, I want to relate to people, I want to also feel connected and have other people feel connected to me, and then that restorative piece as well. So I think that that's where, it kind of it balances it out. And in
I
that
also
respect, it makes a whole lot of sense.
What I thought about when I saw this was the kind of work that you do. So you said you've been doing humanitarian work for a while, right? And
Yep.
nonprofit
And
work,
so my whole
humanitarian.
my whole career has been in the nonprofit international development space. So I've worked for small nonprofits, think tanks, big international NGOs like World Vision International, and then most recently with the UN World Food Program. So very mission driven, very core values, very much like we're doing this because we believe in something bigger than ourselves. And that's the type of work. I could never work for an oil company. I could never work for, unless it was a specific kind of software company. I couldn't work for a software company because it doesn't align with the values that I have about wanting to make the world a better place. So belief in that sense has always
Okay.
been a huge part of who I am as a person. So yeah, I've always been that kind of when I was 6, I told my dad I wanted to be the president of the United States because I thought that that was a way that I could change the world, right? And he was like, "Sure, you can be whatever you want." And now I'm glad I didn't take that, career approach. But um but that's who I was. That's who I've always been even since a child was like, I want to, save the world and do all these things. And so that in that sense, having belief as a number 1 makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Sure, in that context, now I'm understanding,
Yeah.
what you're coming from there. Yeah, because looking at looking at the others, like, and how they all remembering back to these definitions don't necessarily align with what you would traditionally think of as
Yeah.
definitions. Now, like, just remembering that piece,
Yeah.
right? And how they all kind of connect with each other makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's interesting. Again, it reads differently for different people. So I've seen belief on somebody else that I coached a couple years ago that talked about like you may have strong religious beliefs or strong spiritual beliefs, and that doesn't show up at all in yours, Brittany. So,
Nope.
I think naturally when we would think about a strong belief, we might think about go to the religious. Um, but again, just like you so aptly said, Brittany, it's the core strengths that you have around that really
Yeah.
define how your natural talents show up.
Which
Yeah.
is interesting because I also, I mean, and Rachel knows this, like I was raised going to church. I was raised religious. And so the fact that that part of belief showed up and that a different part of belief didn't show up is also really interesting about what comes through and what doesn't when you take this assessment.
Well, I have belief as well, actually. It's in my number 9.
Ah, okay.
And it says, "You have certain core values that are unchanging. The values provide direction and a strong sense of purpose. Your core
Yeah.
values guide and give you purpose. You provide clarity, conviction, and stability in living your values."
So to bring this back to um, kind of where we started and knowledge management and in organizations and just transferring that information. Like I'm fascinated by how we all show up and how we use our natural talents to get to our expected end of transferring that information or transferring that knowledge or giving people what they need to get to that outcome. And so I'm just really, really fascinated by how our strengths show up. And you don't necessarily have to take the Clifton Strengths assessment to have an understanding. You kind of have a general knowledge of how you show up. But I'm just really fascinated in helping companies build systems now that take the 4 main domains into account. You know that there
Hmm.
are generally people who are your go-getters, the people who are going to get stuff done. You know that you have people in operations who make sure that everything gets done. You know that you have your people who you can go to who are always going to be your champions because they're sold out to whatever the cause is and they don't mind yelling it from the rooftops. You know that there are always people who can put together the best teams. You know that there are people who are always going to look at people as individuals and they're going to see people and know what we need to do to make sure everything is rowing. And you're always going to have your strategic thinkers who can see where we need to go. So when you're designing these communities of practice or you're designing these knowledge bases or you're just designing these organizations, you keep that in mind. Or even when you're sending out your communications, yes, you're going to probably send it out, a written communication out through email, but you may also have a town hall that has some of the same information. So if somebody needs to get, in a visually or an auditory, they could do it. Or if somebody just needs to read it or whatever. And now you're centralizing all this information so that it's accessible if somebody can't be there live and in person or was out of office or whatever. So we're building these systems and these approaches to the way that knowledge moves through our organization with strengths in mind. And even, Rachel, you also mentioned the invisible labor because a lot of this just kind of happens naturally. So even if you don't have a head of knowledge management or you don't have a knowledge management department or whatever, or knowledge management is not really raised up as a thing that you're doing, it's still happening. It's just happening in the background. And if you can incorporate this understanding of the types of people that you have that you're working with, I think you can make that happen more effectively and more efficiently.
I think,
I
and
think
that's why I was really excited to have you like walk us through this and have listeners and viewers like experience this process because knowledge management, whether it's in your title or whether it's just something that you do because somebody needs to do it, so many times staff that are doing it, you have to do this type of evaluation on the fly. You have to say, okay, so I'm trying to make the case for knowledge management to this person. What is going to make them, how can I communicate this in a way where they're going to understand what I'm getting at? How can I communicate to this person? How can I, who are my audiences and how do I communicate to them? And that happens so fast and it happens all the time. And because KM staff are usually those connectors, kind of like with Rachel, like not just like, oh, I know a guy, but also, oh, you have the same problem as this person, you should meet. We can make a community of practice that can bring these two regions together to help us solve this particular problem or learn more about this different problem. But to do that on the fly takes a certain level of emotional intelligence. And that's not necessarily a skill that people are like, oh, yeah, knowledge managers have to have all these different skills. We think of tech and like hard skills, but then there's all these softer skills. And emotional intelligence is one of them. But being able to read a room or read your audience like this is something that people do all the time. So to have it framed this way, I think is just super helpful overall,
Yeah.
like you said. But then in the context of KM and supporting staff that are in charge of KM, whether or not they actually do the strengths test, that's their choice. But to be able to even think about these four, the executing, the relationship building, the influencing, and the strategic thinking, even just those four buckets to, as you know, how do I make the case for knowledge management for people who are the executive thinkers and people who are the strategic thinkers and people who are the relationship builders? It is, I thought that that was the most helpful thing. And so I think that that's really um, insightful as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one other thing, you were talking about being able to do that on the fly, and knowledge managers and people in positions in roles kind of like ours. Let me speak for myself. One of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes I don't make those translations quickly enough um, to from activity to outcome. And that's why I talk a lot about outcomes with the language of strengths. And last week, I did a workshop with a professional association, and I talked about how to make that invisible value visible. It's about creating, like thinking about all the things that you've done, all that invisible work that you've done, where, yes, you may have communicated this thing, but the outcome was now you saved the organization $50,000 because you reduced delays and, you prevented friction, whatever, whatever. So being able to take that invisible labor and make it visible and translate it into outcomes that the organization understands, I think would be really valuable um, for the case for knowledge management. Because
Hmm.
oftentimes a lot of these things become a tick box activity, and at some points in my career I have felt a little bit jaded about some of these things, because whereas I'm really passionate about it, and I may work with one or two other people who are and understand why it's important to bring this stuff to the surface and why it's important to centralize and make sure that the things are searchable and that people are able to connect easier. Some people just say, "Oh yeah, we need a SharePoint site. Go build it. You built it. Great." But it's easy to just turn these things into tick box activities instead of really highlighting how invisible outcome activities really, really have major outcomes for the organization. So
Yeah.
I it was just helped this group learn how to take that language and turn it into outcome focused words that executives understand, so that we can continue this work a little bit better with a little bit more support.
Like
Well, this is
round of applause.
fantastic.
I agree with that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
So if someone wanted to reach out and work with you, where would they find you?
I am on LinkedIn, so that's probably the easiest and fastest way to get to me, um, or
Cool.
by email. I
Cool.
have,
We'll put
yeah.
so find our link and email in the show notes. We'll put that there. And definitely, I recommend working with you because this is fascinating.
this was
And at the
this was
very
really
least,
it was
just
really
Yeah, this has
yeah,
been great. I'm very happy to chat about strengths, work with organizations on building strengths based knowledge management cultures, and helping companies get their work done in a way that is human centered, people focused. I feel like a lot of times, interestingly enough, the human element, the people element really gets lost in a lot of the work that we do. And the higher
yeah,
I rose in the ranks as an employee, like, there are actual humans that
yeah.
that need to do this. There there are people here that need to execute on these wonderful strategies that you're talking about. And is this really something that can actually be executed upon? And who are you thinking about when you said this is what we should do? Are you actually thinking about real people or, so I'm very happy to work with organizations to help them bring that human centered, strengths based, knowledge focused cultures to life.
Awesome. Yeah, we need more of that for sure. Yeah, I am the people focused person.
Mhm.
So by all means, especially and especially as we start to transition to include more AI. I mean, AI is important, but you can't run it without people. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
This episode of Not Another KM podcast was edited by me, Rachel Teague. It was produced by Rachel Teague and Brittany Persinger. Our fantastic theme music was created by Chase Tremaine Music. Questions, comments, quips, quotes, or conundrums? Reach out to us at nakmpod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support.